Safe is death. So what does that mean and where does it come from? So I've been following the NHL playoffs, which is basically, the hockey tournament or big, I guess, face off of the year, right, to win the Stanley Cup. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, from my hometown, I was born in Toronto, so I used to be a big Leafs fan. When I moved to Montreal, I slowly became a Habs fan and now big Habs fan. But I still love following the Toronto Maple Leafs because obviously I'm from there, so and they're a big Canadian team, so I like following them. Um, for the past, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years, they've been like one of the best teams in the NHL, and they started like really strong. They have like four big superstar players, but they were never able to make it past the first round, even with those four big superstar players. And I was reading an article yesterday that kind of went into detail of like why exactly it didn't work out. And basically, you know, in one of the lines was that safe is death. And that's because that the true identity of what they were trying to build was like a more modern way of thinking about how to play hockey. A lot of the, I guess, old school mindset of how to play hockey, especially in the playoffs, is that you have to have big dudes and it's going to be a tight checking game, and usually you have to win, you have to learn how to win 2-1 games, 3-2 games, and that's how you're going to win the Stanley Cup. Whereas the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially at the very beginning, and all of their superstars, they're a lot more offensive players, and the style of game that they play is a lot more axed on scoring goals and staying in the offensive zone and trying to keep the puck as much as possible and scoring a lot. And they would win like 5-2, or like even games they would win like 6-5, because even if they get scored 5 goals, they know that they can score more goals than the opponent, so they're gonna win. But a lot of like the pundits and all that, they would always criticize them and say like the reason why they're losing is because they don't know how to play a NHL, playoffs game. And that's why like over the years they kept their core four, but they pushed more and more to build around these four players. And you know, instead of like focusing on their strengths, which is like, okay, like these guys are really good at offense, we should go all in on this identity that we're trying to create. Instead, what they did was that they tried to balance it. They were like, okay, well, these guys are more offensive. Let's try and surround them with these, Stanley Cup winners. And, if we like are able to grind them down to one with our superstars, maybe we're going to be able to win like 2-1, and that's how we're going to win. But basically, what they did is instead of like focusing on their strengths, instead they like diluted their strengths and mitigated their weaknesses. And at the end, they're just like a worse version of another NHL team, right? They were like, let's say if there was a really good defensive team, well, they were like maybe a bit better than the defensive team because they had more offense, but they were not like the best version of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, why am I talking about hockey? Why is that related to you? Well, I think this whole story to me is just like a metaphor for life, in the sense that like if you try and dilute who you truly are as a person, and you focus a lot more on your weaknesses. And actually, this is something that I think I tend to do as well, is like I know what I'm bad at, and instead of focusing a lot on my strengths, I think I would want to try and improve where I'm bad at in life so that I'm less bad. But that also means that I'm not focusing on my strengths. So I'm becoming very average instead of being really, really good in certain areas. And I've been following Twitter a lot, or like on Twitter, I guess I'm following a lot of like tech entrepreneurs and founders, and almost everyone that I've seen speak about, like, what makes a founder really good is usually that, is that a really good founder knows how to focus on their strengths and build a team around them to mitigate their weaknesses with, like, they're going to complement their strengths and weaknesses with other people that are better at them, at doing what they're bad at. So if I'm bad at organization, then I'm going to hire like a really good CEO that's going to balance me. Like if I'm really good at sales, I should be only focusing on sales. And like, I'm going to find a CPO for product, I'm going to find a CEO for operations, I'm going to find a CFO for finance and all that. But I'm not going to not try and do sales, but also try and do finance and operations. I think, like, obviously probably at the beginning you want to kind of do everything, but I think really good successful entrepreneurs find ways to really enhance their strengths versus like mitigating their weaknesses. And I think, like, just in life, that's kind of what you want to do as well, is like find what your strengths really are and try how you can focus or use those strengths as much as possible. And I think that's how you can really win at the game of life, is by finding your strengths. And that if you're too worried about your weaknesses, then you become, that's where, like, safe is best, in a sense that, like, you're not really taking any risks. And because you're trying to mitigate your weaknesses, you just become more diluted, which is, safe. And that's, you basically blend in with everyone else, and you don't really get to stand out because you're not focusing on what you're really born to be good at, let's say. So yeah, so I really think that, safe is death, and it's something that I continuously need to think about, is like, what are my strengths and how I can try and take advantage of those strengths versus like trying to mitigate my weaknesses. So hope that helps. Peace.